This question is really asking similar idea to the last one. We want to figure out pretty much everything about a function that's important, and you're just doing it all at once. Some of these, especially the first one, might feel like you haven't worked before, but you have. It's just not written in maybe a very specific way. So the first one says, for the function r of x equals 2x minus 12 over x squared plus 4x minus 5 is the point negative 6, 0 on the graph of y equals r of x. Well, what we can do is, what this is saying is, if we plug in x is negative 6, do we get 0? And so it looks kind of weird, but we're going to do that. So plug in negative 6 for x. We get r of negative 6 equals 2 times negative 6 minus 12 over negative 6 squared plus 4 times negative 6 minus 5. Now just simplify. 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. Negative 12 minus 12 on the top. On the bottom, negative 6 squared is 36. Plus 4 times negative 6 is negative 24 minus 5. And then negative 12 minus 12 is negative 24. 36 minus 24 is 12. Minus 5 is 7. And this is negative 24 over 7 is not 0. The answer is no. Second part, what is the domain of r of x? You give your answer using integral notation. We know to figure out the domain, we see x in the denominator. We set the denominator equal to 0 and solve that. So we got x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Does that factor? It does. We got x plus 5 and x minus 1. Two numbers that multiply negative 5 and add to 4. And then we set each one equal to 0. We got x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. And the one on the left, subtract 5. And we get x equals negative 5. And the one on the right, we add 1 to each side. And we get x equals 1. Now remember, these are not in the domain, so everything else is. We got negative infinity up till our first point, which is negative 5. Parentheses, union, and then we jump over the negative 5 until we get to our next stopping point, which is 1. And we got another union, and then we jump over 1, and then that goes on forever. There's not another stopping point. Now the third part, r of negative 1, just telling us to plug in negative 1 for r. So I'm going to label it over here as part C. Or sorry, plug in negative 1 for x. So we've got r of negative 1 equals 2 times negative 1 minus 12 over negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 5. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, minus 12 is negative 14. 1 squared is 1, plus 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, minus 5. We got negative 14 over negative 8. And we can simplify this. The negatives cancel out, and we can take a 2 out of each. We get 7 over 4. So r of negative 1 is 7 over 4. Right. Part D, it asks for what values of x does r of x equal 0? Now, what this is asking us to do is plug in 0 for r of x. So we got 0 equals 2x minus 12 over x squared plus 4x minus 5. Now to solve for x here, we have a fraction. We want to get rid of the fraction. Multiply each side by the denominator. So we multiply each side by x squared plus 4x minus 5. Or you can cross multiply, whichever one you prefer. Cross multiplying here, when you can do it, when there's just one fraction on each side, it's a lot better because it's going to be quicker. You just have to think about 0 being 0 over 1. All right, so we're going to cross multiply. The great thing about cross multiplying here, I mean, you can do it, you should do it anyway, is when we multiply the 0 by the x squared plus 4x minus 5, and then we multiply the 1 by the 2x minus 12. Now, multiplying by 0 is great because what happens is this left side is just 0. It doesn't matter what x is because we're multiplying it by 0. And then on the right side, we multiply something by 1. It stays the same. So we got 2x minus 12. And now we can solve for x. Add the 12 to each side. So we got 12 on the left, 0 plus 12 is 12. And on the right, we got 2x. And then divide each side by the 2. And we get x equals 6. So for what values of x does r of x equal 0? The answer is just 6. And then the last one, it's going to be very similar in how we set up to this one. It's just going to be longer because the number's not 0. We want to know what values of r does r of x equals negative 8 over 7. So we're going to take our equation and plug in negative 8 over 7 for r of x. I guess one benefit of this one is it's already written as a fraction, so it's more easily seen that you can cross multiply. That's 7. Let me make it more emphasized. So we multiply, cross multiply, we got negative 8 times x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 7 times 2x minus 12. Right, now we want to distribute both sides, distribute the negative 8 through and the 7 through. So we got negative 8x squared minus 32x plus 40 equals 14x minus 84. You've probably worked plenty of problems in this class where the numbers look a little messy, but everything will work out as long as you don't make a mistake. So we're going to factor this because we have multiple powers of x. Subtract the 14x and add 84 to each side. Got 0 on the right, and on the left we got negative 8x squared minus 46x plus 124. Now, if we have anything in common, we should take care of that, and we do have a 2 in common. So I'm going to factor a 2 out. I'm also going to factor a negative out, so divide everything by negative 2. The reason why I like to do that is because I don't like having negatives on the x squared part. It just bothers me, confuses my brain, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't like it either, you can get rid of it, like I'm doing here. And so that'll help with that. The front term will be 4x squared plus 23x, 46 over 2 is 23, minus 62 equals 0. Now, absolutely the hard part here is now factoring this because the numbers aren't very nice. There's a lot of methods. If you use the AC method, which I prefer, it shouldn't be too bad. All right, so we got our A is 4, our b is 23, and our c is negative 62. A times c is 4 times negative 62, which equals, we could do that by hand, but let's just grab our calculator real quick. 4 times negative 62, it's negative 248. All right, so we want two numbers that multiply to negative 248 and add to 23. Now we can kind of use our calculator once again to help us. We want two numbers, that actually helps. We want two numbers that multiply to negative 248 and add to 23. So what I like to do, especially if you have an even number, is just divide by 2. And would 2 and negative 124 work? Definitely not. Those don't add to 23. What if we divide it by 4? So just, doing powers of 2. Well, 4 and 62, those aren't going to add to 23. What about if we do 8? Next power of 2. We get 8 and 31, and those would work because 31 minus 8 is 23. So we want to be 31 and negative 8. Right? So we want them to add to 23, so 31 should be positive, 8 should be negative. Right, so we go ahead and rewrite this. 4x squared minus 8x plus 31x minus 62 equals 0. If you do the 31 first and the 8 second, that's fine as well. The reason why I did them is I kind of thought, well, 4 and 8 go together. But then we factor by grouping. Okay, so we've got a 4x in common here. We get x minus 2. The 4 is gone and one of the x's is gone. And then in the second part, what's in common with 31x and 62? It's 31. And we get x minus 2. All right, so I'll just write a little reminder here. We're doing factor by grouping. Now we have it grouped. We've got what's in front, 4x plus 31 as one of our factors, and then the other factor is x minus 2. Set each one to 0. We got 4x plus 31 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. And the one on the left, subtract the 31. Since I'm kind of out of room, I'm just going to talk through the two steps. We subtract the 31 to get negative 31, and then we divide by 4, so we get negative 31 over 4. The one on the right, we add 2 to each side, and we get x equals 2. So this last final part has two answers, negative 31 over 4 and 2. And that last one probably took longer than the rest combined. Maybe you'll have a luckier fraction than me and it'll work out a little bit quicker.